Okay. Hey you guys, thank you for joining me, Reese Roberts, on another short episode of Entertain the Thought. If you're new here, we talk about consciousness, we talk about really everything. We talk about technology, sociology, science, history, politics, economics, whatever you can think of, that's what we talk about. So I want to do a continuation. Actually, I'm going to be doing these episodes a lot. So make sure you tune in because these are little short tidbits about science and about the world that you can really use to help you elevate into the fifth dimension. So on the last video, I introduced the concept for this video, which came from a very interesting conversation I had with one of my followers. This young man set up a consultation with me because he wanted to talk about anatomy. So we got into a really good discussion about the female body and also about dimensions. So we're going to talk about that today. But first, let me also direct you to my link in bio so that you can follow me on social media, other social media platforms. Right now, I post these mainly on Instagram, but I also do have a YouTube channel. I also have a Patreon. My website is reeseroberts.com. You can check out my link in bio to find me on all those platforms, also LinkedIn as well. So okay, now going back to the topic, which I said it really is exciting to me. So I want you to imagine with me that you're kind of inside exploring the female anatomy and how the female body is connected to the fifth dimension while being in the third dimension. And I think this is why this particular person kind of took interest in the female anatomy, because we have the ability to bring life from one dimension to another through our active portals, which are our bodies, our uterus, the vagina, the canal. All of those things are connected to this other dimension where life comes from. And this is sort of a religious concept that I'm going to start off with, and I make reference to it all the time. And it's basically talking about the fact that, like in the Bible, it says we are in the world but not of it. So I want to kind of draw your attention there and make sure that you get conceptually that consciousness does not originate on this planet. Consciousness originates from another dimension, which we are going to refer to as the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension is a place where there are added layers on the dimension where we came from, which is just now the physical third dimension. So with that being said, we have to understand that there are layers and levels to the dimensions of perception that we're allowed to perceive. I'll put it that way. There are different paradigms. So with the third, first of all, the concepts I'm going to give you are mathematical. So when we're talking about just one dimension, we're just talking about a straight line between 2 points, something that has no depth perception to it. When we get to the third dimension, we end up having not only a singular line, but we also have length. We also introduce width, and then we introduce depth. But in the fifth dimension, we also have perception of angles, ratios, and degrees. Okay, this is math. The further we get into our ascension, we will start to perceive things that correspond with mathematical concepts. And if you know anything about the universe, you know that lots of things are proportionate to other things, especially the human body. We have things like the golden ratio. We have things like the Fibonacci sequence. We have things like pi. These are all patterned numbers that have a quality or a characteristic about them that correspond with the meaning of life and also the order and law of life. So with that being said, we have to understand that in the fifth dimension, practically what we're seeing and what we're experiencing as angles, ratios, and degrees, that would be degrees of knowledge, that would be angles of perception, and then that would be a ratio of polarity. So for example, if I am a polarized being, that means that I'm on a sliding scale of what I can become. I'm on a sliding scale of what I identify as and what I can perceive. So with me being a dual-natured being, I have to decide how much of one thing I want to be, because that's what the fifth dimension is all about. It's about looking at reality to determine how much of yourself you need to build up and in what ways. So if I'm in the fifth dimension and I'm looking at my overall character, my overall existence, my overall reality, then I'm going to introduce angles of perception, because again, in the fifth dimension, we understand that there's not just one side to any story. There is a perception that you can, or a way that you can look at things to angle your perception a certain way that benefits you. This is what we do in transmutation. When we're looking at society and we're seeing things that we feel need to be changed, we're going to practice this law of these angles and ratios from the fifth dimension. When we start to say, well, okay, I may have failed, but in my failure, because I'm looking at this from another angle, I'm going to actually take it as a lesson. I'm going to take it as a golden nugget. I'm not going to allow it to have a negative impact on what I'm experiencing in my reality. So the fifth dimension brings us lots of power when we introduce these angles, ratios, and degrees. So degrees of knowledge, they come to you as you perceive higher. As you, as you elevate your angles of perception, then your degrees of knowledge are correspondingly getting higher. They're raising along with your vibrations, because in order for you to practice, you must first gain knowledge. If you're not gaining knowledge, there's no way for you to practice on the ascension techniques or whatever you choose to employ. So we have to get this general understanding of where the art imitates reality. I'll put it that way. When art imitates reality, we're able to look at life in different ways that, again, become more beneficial to us if we are looking at it one way instead of the other. So it's imperative to have this angle, degree, and ratio, because we're allowing ourselves to experience the fifth dimension. We're allowing ourselves to let the fifth dimension become our reality when we're realizing that we're in control of the perception by way of the way we're looking at it, the angle that we're looking at it from, by way of the ratio in which we intend to become things, because we can become anything, good or bad or in between. So the ratio of what we want to be and what we want to see, that's up to us. The fifth dimension gives us the power to do so. And then we have degrees of knowledge that allow us to do all of that. The degrees of knowledge allow us to participate in the fifth dimensional perceptions of things, and it allows us to exponentially increase our powers and abilities, especially if we are using our fifth degree perception or our fifth dimension perception for our evolution. If we're looking at things so that we can build ourselves, build our society, increase our intellectual capacity, all those things are possible to us if we are practicing the fifth dimensional degrees, angles, and ratios, in addition to already our five senses that are existing in the third dimension. Third dimension is just about being able to perceive depth. Okay, we are given depth when we are given the third dimension, but when we have the fifth dimension, it takes that depth to an exponentially higher rate of capacity, or excuse me, a higher capacity to achieve this practice. The things that we're focusing on now when we're talking about practicing on the fifth dimension, we're talking about things like moving your energy. There are so many different practices and so many different forms, tools, I'll say, that allow you to move your energy, whether that be Reiki, it could be Chi, it could be meditation, it could be grounding yourself whenever you are out in nature, when you're connecting with the earth. Those things all allow us to move our energy, and that's what we're here to do. So as we move our energy and we're participating in these practices to do so, the fifth dimension is making it possible for us to do that at a much higher rate, and especially when we're talking about our vibration. When we're talking about our rate of vibration and the frequency that we're elevating to, this is all being done by the angles, degrees, and ratios of the fifth dimension. This is something that is, oh, I'm glad I didn't forget to say this. This is something that is indicated to us when we look at our natal charts. The fifth dimension is also very highly about navigation and triangulation, which again is those angles, okay? The angles form triangles in most, yeah. The angles form triangles. I don't think there's a but to that. But when you look at a person's natal chart, what you're looking at is how their life patterns are being formed and how they are utilizing those capacities in order for them to build and evolve through life. This is about star alignment, how the stars create angles amongst themselves, and those angles are basically relationships. They are connections and ties that really plan out how all of evolution is to occur. And so when we pay attention to those angles, ratios, and degrees, we allow ourselves to know more about ourselves in this fifth dimensional capacity, where we're now using our senses to enhance and enlighten the depth perception and also the ascension process of our evolution. So information is very key. Information is information is one of the tools that we're going to use to make all those things happen. So it's very imperative for us to get our information up, share with each other through these angles, relationships, and also the ratios that we're creating when we meet each other, when we connect with each other, when we share with each other, when we communicate with each other. These things all create relationships. They all create angles, ratios, degrees of knowledge, of being, of perception. So I want us to master that, okay? Master it so that we can figure out what we're doing with each other. This contributes also to our collective consciousness. It contributes to how we're aligning with the universal laws and how we are surpassing what's been happening in the third dimension. The third dimension is where oppression lives. And so as we transcend the third dimensional senses and we add in our fifth dimension angles, ratios, and degrees, then the third dimension perceptions don't necessarily take precedence anymore. As you can see, things like our currency, our economy, all those things are not really making as much sense anymore, and they don't really mean as much anymore. We're moving on to values, ethics, laws, hierarchies, and things of that nature, and we're more relying on those things than we are on the constructs that we've allowed ourselves to create in the third dimension. So with that being said, I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. I really do hope that you will post your comments and let me know any questions you have so we can go over them in the comments and we can share any of the things that we've learned about the fifth dimension with each other, because it's something that is inevitable. It's here already. We're already living in the fifth dimension. So why not share about it and figure out how we are perceiving our activities here and how we are moving about, because it's not the same as the third dimension. So anyway, my name is Reese Roberts. Please visit reeseroberts.com. Please click my link in bio to get more familiar with my products and services. And please stay tuned because I have so much more that is in development for you. And we're going to start small, but we're going to work our way up to my, what do I call it? I wouldn't call it my baby because that's my personal, what I normally call it, but it's just a large project that I want you all to be involved in. So stay tuned, visit reeseroberts.com, follow, click, like, subscribe, share. That's it. Peace, you guys. Peace and love.